everyone, I'm Diane Macedo in New York.
And I'm Phil Lipoff in Lublin, Poland, right near the border with Ukraine.
And we're closely following the looming threat of a major Russian invasion after Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered troops into two separatist regions of Ukraine. President Biden has already called Putin's actions the beginning of a Russian invasion into Ukraine. And Phil, you're just a few hours from one of the busiest border crossings between Poland and Ukraine.
Yeah, Diane, about 60 miles to the east of where we are here in Lublin is one of the busiest border crossings in all of Poland on the border with Ukraine. And this area becomes very important should Vladimir Putin decide to make a full-scale invasion into Ukraine. That would push tens of thousands of Ukrainians toward the border here in Poland. It would cause a refugee crisis, which is why we have thousands of U.S. troops here on the ground in Poland. More on that in a minute. But first, there were some major and concerning developments, Diane, overnight and into today here in the region. First, a dire warning from Ukraine's military. We just learned that key members of parliament have been briefed that the military expects the situation in the eastern part of the country to deteriorate dramatically over the next 2 days. That's from the military. According to sources, 4 sources familiar with the briefing, the fear is Russia may launch a major attack on 2 cities beyond eastern Ukraine. One, the second largest city in Ukraine, which is about 20 miles from the Russian border, and then a city in the south near Crimea, which Vladimir Putin already annexed back in 2014. This is all after the state of emergency was declared by President Zelensky, and the military has been ordered to call up reservists 18 to 60 years of age, many with combat training. President Zelensky says not to fight right now, but that the country is on a heightened sense of alert because, Diane, they just simply don't know what Russia's going to do next.
And we are covering every angle of this crisis. So, Phil, stay with me. I also want to bring in foreign correspondent James Longman in Moscow, White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks in D.C., and ABC News contributor Darrell Blocker, the former CIA deputy director of counterterrorism, for more on this. And Darrell, I'd like to start with you. Ukraine's government says a new cyber attack has hit several of its government ministries, knocking their websites offline. What does that tell you? And is this going to be another kind of warfare that's happening in the background of what we're seeing militarily?
Absolutely. It's probably one of the new modern warfare where no lives have to be lost, where they can take down entire networks, where they can sow dissension, confusion. So that is, along with the disinformation program that's already been launched as long as 8 years ago when they annexed the Crimea.
Mary Alice, how is the U.S. likely to respond if Russia does go ahead and attack areas outside of these separatist regions?
Yeah, Diane, that would be that kind of major escalation that the White House has been warning about. I would assume the White House would respond by lobbying the biggest, most forceful sanctions that they still have available to them. You know, things they've been talking about, like potentially sanctioning Putin himself, import-export sanctions, moves on Russian banks. I mean, they have threatened to bring sanctions that would be crippling, would be so costly, unlike anything we've seen before. We've seen them starting to ratchet up towards that, but if Putin were to attack major Ukrainian cities outside that eastern Donbass region, that's the kind of move that would trigger sort of the biggest, heaviest sanctions from the U.S. government.
And James, Russia is warning that U.S. sanctions will be met with a strong response. What do you think that means?
In sort of typical fashion, a threat, but not really clear what it actually means. There's been a lot of bluster today about these sanctions. They have been saying that, you know, Russia has been sanction-proofing its economy for months and years. I remember a couple of months ago there was talk about how everyone should be buying Russian cheese because you might not be able to get French cheese anymore, but obviously an economy can't run on cheese. But this is just part of the way that Russia deals with these things. It likes to insult the West rather than, you know, give any kind of real answer. I should say that, you know, Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson here in the Foreign Ministry, who likes to give pretty insulting public commentary, she's been speaking today, and she's been basically saying that sanctions would have happened anyway. It doesn't matter what Russia does. And it's just part of the narrative that this is just par for the course with dealing with the West, that Russia will be the eternal enemy of the West and there's nothing that it can do other than defend itself. So it's been basically readying its people for the possibility that life will just start to get more and more expensive. I mean, it's debatable whether or not sanctions ever work anyway. I mean, a lot of these sanctions will hit individuals with a lot of money. So yes, travel bans will obviously impact them, but when it comes to their money, I mean, you know, it's quite actually difficult with very rich people. When you're talking about billionaires, they can hide their money pretty easily and get around these things. So, and a lot of the time, countries often don't implement them as hardly as they say they're going to do, and Russia kind of knows that. But over and above it, you know, Russia just enjoys the debate around these things because it just solidifies the image they can portray to their own people here in the country that the West is out to get them.
And Phil, you mentioned a potential refugee crisis. What kind of plans is Poland putting into place in the event this does escalate?
Well, Diane, there are plans. They're not being released publicly, but this is what we do know. The U.S. has sent nearly 5,000 troops here to Poland, 82nd Airborne Division, and they have been working very closely with the Polish authorities and the military and the police along the border. As I said, Lublin, where I am, is about 60 miles from one of the busiest border crossings for Ukraine into Poland. And if the scenario that Mary Alice was laying out actually comes to fruition, it would push tens of thousands of Ukrainians this way toward Poland, and then these border crossings, 8 of them up and down the border, would become very important. What happens to the Ukrainians who are trying to come into Poland? Are they all of them allowed in? If they are, where do they go? Those plans have not been released, but our military, at least 5,000 members of them, have been working on what to do if that scenario happens. And with the increased tensions and the sanctions that James is talking about, it's looking more and more like that may be possible by the day. Diane?
Now, those U.S. troops that have been deployed to neighboring countries, do we know yet what their role will be? Phil?
Well, we know what their role won't be, for sure. President Biden has said these troops are not going to fight in any way, shape, or form. He's even said they're not going in to Ukraine to rescue U.S. citizens, that they will need to come here. And there is a plan for U.S. citizens once they get to Poland. But we do know they are here to assist in what could be a major refugee crisis.
And Daryl, Russian-controlled separatists are claiming 2 large terrorist attacks, in their words, took place in the territory last night. So how do intelligence agencies know what's a false flag and what isn't? And how do they counter misinformation and disinformation right now?
Unfortunately, time is the major factor, because verification of these events is fairly easy over a 24, 72-hour period. But when people have to make decisions and react on, is it something that's going to happen right now, mistakes can be made. Terrorist attack, who initiated it, who was injured, who was behind it, all of that is taken into account. So if Putin is using that as a reason for going in, there's nothing that we can do to stop him from doing that if he's launching tanks. But and then, of course, after the fact, no one's going to care that it was fake.
And James, Russia is facing more sanctions by the day from other European countries. We know Vladimir Putin said that they've been kind of sanction-proofing their economy, as you mentioned. But, I mean, if enough of these pile on, could this change Putin's course?
It doesn't feel like it. Yeah, we've had the European Union now say that they are now sanctioning every single member of the Duma, the Russian parliament, that voted to recognize the independence of these 2 separatist regions of eastern Ukraine. A number of members of the inner circle, Maria Zakharova, who I just spoke to you about, she's on the sanctions list. A number of very, very rich members of Vladimir Putin's inner circle. It does feel, though, that it's a trajectory which is difficult for him to come back from. And I should tell you, though, Diane, that the sense here in Moscow, it's very difficult to read, because one minute people think, oh, there's no way he's going to invade our neighbor, Ukraine. And the next, there's a moment which makes people really think, actually, he means business. And, you know, there's been a few of these moments over the last few days. The vote in the parliament to allow Russia to go to a foreign country the Russian army to invade a foreign country. That was a big, big moment. That was the same law that was passed in 2014 where the army annexed Crimea. So there have been these moments that have terrified people, and I don't think sanctions at this point are going to make much difference, but who knows? Dan?
And Mary Alice, the European Union and NATO have both said that Russia moved forces into Ukraine. Now, President Biden stopped short of saying that exactly. Why are we seeing so much focus on the language used to describe what's happening right now?
Yeah, Dan, because they're trying to decide what should trigger new sanctions, and they want to make sure partners and allies are making those decisions together. White House sources have been telling us for weeks that they think sanctions only have a chance at changing Putin's calculus if they are done together in a really coordinated fashion. You know, I really agree with James that it's hard to imagine sanctions at this point changing Putin's calculus, but it was interesting that Ukraine's foreign minister today went again to the UN, and he said he does still think there's a chance. If sanctions are tough enough, if the political messaging is tough enough, he still thinks that the pressure from the international community can sway the Kremlin. But of course, if we actually start to see that worst case scenario, really an attack on major Ukrainian cities outside that eastern region, the whole world is going to be asking what else the West should have done besides just sanctions.
All right, James Longman, Mary Alice Parks, Darrell Blocker, and Phil Lipoff, thank you all. Coming up, opening statements have begun in the trial of the only police officer charged in relation to the police raid that ended with Breonna Taylor's death. More on what to expect in court today after the break. Welcome back. We're following several other top stories this morning, including another storm set to cross the U.S. from Southern California to New England. 38 states are on alert from California to Maine for heavy snow, significant ice, flooding, and bitter cold. A winter storm warning has been issued for Dallas, and that could create dangerous icy conditions on the roads from Texas to Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Illinois. Officials say at least 3 convoys of truckers are headed to Washington, D.C. to protest COVID-19 vaccine mandates and other issues ahead of President Biden's State of the Union address on March 1st. After seeing truckers disrupt traffic on this bridge linking the U.S. to Canada and large-scale protests in Canada's capital of Ottawa, officials in D.C. say they are taking no chances. As many as 700 National Guard troops could be deployed, and it's possible there could be fencing back up around the U.S. Capitol. Jury deliberations are underway in the trial of 3 former Minneapolis police officers charged with violating George Floyd's civil rights. Toe Tao, J. Alexander King, and Thomas Lane are standing trial in federal court. They're accused of depriving Floyd's right to medical care when former officer Derek Chauvin put his knee on Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes, murdering him. King and Tao are also charged with failing to intervene. Defense attorneys have argued the men were too inexperienced and were not trained properly. All 3 former officers have pleaded not guilty. And an investigation is underway after a helicopter crash at a U.S. Navy missile facility in Hawaii. 4 civilians are dead after the chopper went down on the island of Kauai. It was providing support for a training operation. And the trial is underway now in Louisville, Kentucky, for the former Kentucky police officer, Brett Hankinson, who was involved in a raid that killed Breonna Taylor. Hankinson is charged with firing into a neighboring apartment while serving a no-knock warrant on Taylor's apartment in March 13th of 2020. He has pleaded not guilty. If convicted, he faces up to 5 years in prison. Host and legal analyst at Law and Crime Network, Terry Austin, joins me now for more on this. Terry, opening statements have now wrapped up. What are your big takeaways?
Well, what I was impressed with is the fact that the prosecution laid out so many of the facts. In fact, I thought that the defense said that she laid out too many facts, but I think the jury is going to be very clear on at least what the prosecution is thinking the case will say to them. And essentially what Ms. Whaley is trying to tell them is there was no need for Brett Hankinson to shoot wildly. He had 10 shots and several of them went into this neighboring apartment, and they are going to have witnesses to testify. Cody, who was the individual in the other apartment along with Chelsea, his partner, and in fact she was pregnant and a young son. But the testimony is basically going to be that these shots came wildly into the apartment, and that Brett Hankinson really didn't see an AR-15 as he thought he had. It was really a Glock. And so he wasn't justified. He was being very unreasonable. And she laid out every single detail for the jury to see. And the defense basically just said, look, this was a chaotic scene. And what Hankinson did was reasonable, it was logical, and it was rational. So we'll see what the jury thinks based on this evidence.
What are you going to be looking out for these next few days as this trial gets underway? What are some of the key points and arguments that could sway this trial one way or the other?
The one piece of evidence that I'm very curious to see is what will the neighbors say? We know we're going to hear from officers. We're going to hear from the SWAT team. We're going to hear from firearms experts and trainers. But I'm really curious what the neighbors will say. Theoretically, they should be objective. They should be able to say what they heard. Was there a knock? Was there a voice that said police officers? Did anyone identify themselves? Were the shootings wild? So I'm really curious to see what those neighbors think happened on that night of the scene. And frankly, I think they're going to shed more light to the jury as far as what was happening. I think everyone is going to say it was chaotic. And frankly, I don't think that bodes well for the defense. They're supposed to be able to go into a scene and make sure that they are handling it so it doesn't become chaotic. That's not an excuse to have shot wildly into either one of those apartments.
And this is the only trial and charge, for that matter, to emerge from the police raid that killed Breonna Taylor. But Brett Hankinson is not the officer who shot her. He's not being charged in relation to shooting Breonna Taylor. He's being charged for shooting into the neighbor's apartment, as you said. So what is the broader impact, if any, of this trial, since Hankinson is the sole officer from that raid who's being tried?
It's an excellent question, and I think the community at large, and particularly the parents and the family of Breonna Taylor, want some justice. They want to make sure that the people responsible for her death do have charges brought against them. The state did not feel as though there was enough to bring anything against the other officers.
All right, Terry Austin, always great to have your legal analysis. Terry, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, the growing movement leading many to turn down a drink. Stay with us. Welcome back to ABC News Live. The last 2 years have forced many of us to take stock of our drinking habits. Now, it's leading to a growing movement called Sober Curious. So what exactly does it mean to be sober curious? Maria Villarreal takes a look at the new drinks, new spaces, and new mindset of this sweeping trend.
Of all the things Texas can claim, subtlety is not one of them.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I might be able to go to a bar with these on.
Welcome to Austin, home to big football, big boots, and of course, big parties. And on 6th Street, you'd be hard-pressed to find a place that isn't a bar. On Friday night, just a few blocks from downtown, Sands Bar is just as busy 30 minutes after opening. But the cocktails made here have no alcohol.
People will just be bar hopping, and they'll just come through the door. And when they walk in, immediately they know that something's not the same.
Is it that OS moment?
Yeah. It's like they look around, they hear
Wait a minute.
They hear music, they see people are laughing, drinks are being clinked around. Something's different, and it's the energy.
A first of its kind in Texas, the Sands Bar is fueled by a growing movement known as Sober Curious. It means asking yourself if being served alcohol is serving you. The expression coined by author Ruby Warrington in 2016.
When you talk about questioning your drinking, what does that mean?
Perhaps when it came to problem drinking, it wasn't quite as black and white as you're a normal drinker or you're an alcoholic.
Warrington quickly discovered she wasn't alone. Pre-pandemic, she hosted Sober Curious events with hundreds in attendance and wrote 2 best-selling books about giving up booze.
A lot of the times when we think about removing alcohol, we think that life's going to become boring or not be as fun. But framing it as, could my life be better without alcohol, actually kind of opens the door to all sorts of possibilities.
In the early days of the pandemic, we all saw the headlines and the TikToks.
Bored in a house, bored in a house, bored.
Drinking in lockdown. A 2021 study published in JAMA found that the frequency of alcohol consumption increased 14% from the previous year. For women, binge drinking surged 41%.
A lot of people have got to a point where they're actually starting to question their drinking.
Dry January is a popular entry point, including for our own Dr. Jen Ashton.
You're having a dry January.
Once again, TJ and I doing dry January. They function better, they're thinking more clearly, or just, you know, they've done this experiment itself and they've found positive results. That's what life is about.
The growing number of people dipping their toes in the Sober Curious pool is now pushing the beverage industry to make room for newbies. In fact, alcohol-free product sales shot up 33% in 2021, according to Nielsen IQ. Even dedicated shops opening up. Big-name celebrities like Katy Perry, Blake Lively, and Macklemore cashing in by creating their own non-alcoholic drinks. Supermodel Bella Hadid teaming up with Jen Batchelor's company Kin Euphorics as a part of a whole new class of so-called adult functional beverages. This dietary supplement, a concoction of ingredients like caffeine, 5-HTP, and vitamin B6.
Kin. I look to herbs, I look to Ayurvedic medicine and sort of stress management techniques.
She says the success speaks to something greater, a generational trend.
Gen Z is dubbed the sober generation. They just didn't pick up drinking. They don't even have the same qualms that me and my friends do about, okay, wait, when's a good time to stop drinking? How am I gonna do this? And like planning around it. They're just like, it's presupposed that everything they put in their body should be good.
Kin Euphorics, based in Austin, is one of the many options stocked behind Chris's bar, where he shows us his signature non-alcoholic cocktail.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is
Yeah, I like it. I love it.
Okay. I can see why people come here. This really does make me feel like I'm drinking an alcoholic drink.
Yeah.
Chris's idea to open this bar was born out of his own struggle with alcohol that started when he was 16.
When did you have your first drink with alcohol?
On a very hot Texas day, I had beer that had been sitting in someone's trunk for 6 hours.
Oh, gosh.
But then I had this amazing feeling, and it was this feeling of connection. I felt like I belonged, like I was one of the boys. And that was when I connected alcohol with connection and belonging and being a part of.
At 23, Chris was in rehab. He gave up alcohol and became an addiction therapist specializing in alcohol.
When I got into rehab, the first thing I heard was someone tell me, you don't ever have to feel lonely again. And so this space that we're sitting in today is a direct result from that very real statement that someone made to me 15 years ago.
While going sober curious can be daunting, telling others represents another hurdle. Once you find that support, taking it a day at a time seems less scary.
So maybe they're asking, you know, why don't you drink? And instead of the typical way that conversation could go, you can answer this evolutionary and this positive question of, yeah, I don't drink because I'm really focused on my writing right now. And then the questions that come after that are much more interesting. Oh, tell me about the book you want to write.
A sentiment shared by John Flores, a regular at the Sands Bar.
You know, you can come here, sit here and just sit at the bar and not talk to anyone all night, or you could make 2 or 3 new friends tonight.
Liquid courage replaced with clear-headed encouragement.
I survived because of this community. This community lifts this concept up. The Sober Curious Life is asking you to start over, build anew, and find new fun and new adventure.
All right, very cool. Our thanks to Maria Villarreal for that report. And our thanks to you for joining us. I'm Diane Macedo. Stay with us as ABC News Live continues with news, context, and analysis right after this.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.